Hey everyone, today I'm going to answer one of my most asked questions, which is how to get better pictures using your portrait mode on your phone. I'm going to be using my Google Pixel 4a, but this works with whatever smartphone that has a portrait mode on it. I'm also going to talk about when to use the mode. This might surprise you, and also how it works to get a better understanding of when it works and when it doesn't. For those of you who are new to this channel, I'm Bellemare-Alford, a young photographer and filmmaker on a journey to become better at this art. I recently published a video about landscape photography using your phone, and everything I said in that video is still valid, except one thing that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Let's start by talking about when you should be using a portrait mode. The most obvious reason is when you take a picture of yourself or of someone, and that's why it's called portrait mode. But I want you to think a little bit about why you're using this mode when you're taking pictures of people. The answer to this question is actually that it creates a nice blurry background, and by creating a blurry background, you're actually putting more focus on your main subject, the person inside of the shot. The same idea can be applied when taking landscape photos, and this is why I use it so much to take landscape photos. Like I said inside of my landscape photography video, it's very important to be telling a story when you're taking a picture. Most people, when seeing a landscape, are just going to come inside of their camera here and capture the nice wide landscape. But this doesn't tell much about the story. So this is where I like to go and take some detailed shots of different things around the scene to really tell a more compelling story when you look through the pictures. So for example, here we could come here and take the branch right in front of here, go inside of our portrait mode and focus on the little branch in the front here and take a picture like this. By doing this, we're going to get a much more compelling shot that tells something that is different and that people are not used to seeing because they're used to seeing the whole wide landscape, not these detailed shots. Let's talk about another reason why it's so interesting to be using the portrait mode on your phone for landscape photography. And this one is, like I said, it adds more focus to your subject. So for example, if I wanted to take the snow on the tree in the background here and I use the default camera setting on my camera here, you're actually going to get pretty much everything inside on focus. And that means it's pretty hard for your eye to actually see what is your subject and what you're trying to take a picture of. Now if you go inside of portrait mode here and we place our subject here, and I'm just going to bring up the shadows, we're going to see that it's actually going to create multiple layers in the picture, putting the background completely blurry and also the branches in the front blurry. And this is really going to help your eye get to the subject and understand what you're taking a picture of inside of this photo. Another reason why this is great is that it adds more depth in the picture. Because there's more blur, it's actually making the picture look a lot better and a lot more three-dimensional. Another reason why it's great to be using the portrait mode inside of your phone when taking landscape is that it allows to remove distracting backgrounds. So for example, if we wanted to take the little things on the branches here and we used our main camera here, when taking the shot, we're going to get some natural blur in the background from the lens, but we're still going to see that the background is very distracting inside of this photo. So now if we move and we use the portrait mode, we're really going to be able to get rid of that distracting background. So here when we take the shot, once it processes the photo, we're going to see it's going to be much better in the end, where we get rid of all that very distracting background inside of the photo. Another reason why I like using my portrait mode is actually to be able to zoom in a little bit more inside of the shot. So if we look here at our main camera, we're going to see that it's actually quite wide, but now that if we zoom in inside of the portrait mode, we get much more closer to our subject. And this is great, especially when you're doing some macro shots, because you can get closer to your subject without having to bring the camera actually closer. And in my experience, this gives a little bit better images compared to just zooming in inside of your main camera when taking a shot. It wouldn't be one of my videos if I didn't take the time to actually explain how this technology works. One of my videos already covers what is the difference of the blur using a phone and the blur using a DSLR, so I'm going to point to that video if that's what we want to learn. In this video, we're really going to talk about the detail of how the phone differentiates what is the foreground and what is the background and how it then creates the blur inside of the shot. Google Pixel 4a has a technology that is called dual pixel, and if you don't know what is dual pixel and why it's important, it's because on the sensor for every single pixel, it actually has two different pixels on the sensor capturing the information. And this allows to get more information on depth, because just like your eyes need to have two eyes in a pair to see depth, it's the same thing using a camera. If you still don't really understand why this matters, we're going to do a pretty quick example here, which should help you quite a lot to understand how it works. So if you take a first picture with the foreground here, and then just move down a little bit, we're going to see that when we compare these two shots, the foreground didn't move much where the part was in focus, but the part that is blurry in the background actually moved a lot. And this is what we call parallax, which means that the part in the front that is moving doesn't move at the same speed as the part in the background because it's much further away. By using this information, they're actually able to understand what is the foreground and what is the background, because they only have to compare the same parts in the picture and see how much they moved. So the more it moved, the further it is in the picture, and the less it moved, the closer it is to the sharp part of the picture. I hope you understood that this is a complete exaggeration, and that in real life you don't get as much parallax in the background because the pixels are so close. But this is very important to understand when you can get some better results inside of your portrait mode photos. So the thing you want to look for when taking portrait photos is to get a lot of contrast between the foreground and the background, and especially in terms of color. So for example, if you have a foreground and a background that are brown and have the same texture, it's going to be really hard for the software to determine what is the foreground and what is the background, because everything is going to look the same to them, even if the thing in the background moves a little bit. When they have a case like this is actually where the AI is going to kick in and try and come and help determining what is the foreground and what is the background. So as long as you're taking pictures of things that are very common, so let's say a face of a person, a pet, or thing like that, it's actually going to be pretty easy for the AI to determine what is the foreground and what is the background, and kind of save the picture even if you didn't have that much contrast in the picture. Now, they might not always work, because if you're taking pictures of things that are not common, the AI might have to be trained on that, which means it's not going to be able to come and help you inside of that case. Another thing you're looking for is to take pictures when you have a lot of light. And I know that inside of my landscape photography photo, I said that you don't want to have a nice sunny day, but actually taking portrait photos in a nice sunny day is actually better, because you get more contrast between your foreground and your background. And like I said, contrast is very important in this case. Now let's talk about when portrait mode won't work as well. The first reason, like I just said, is when you don't have enough contrast between your foreground and your background subject. The second reason is when you don't have enough distance between your foreground subject and your background subject. So for example, if you're taking a branch in the foreground and you have a lot of branches around, it's actually going to be really hard for the camera to determine what is the foreground and what is the background, because there's not enough parallax with your objects moving in the background to really help it tell what is the foreground and what is the background. The last thing is, like I said, if it's not trained on the AI is not going to be able to come and help and tell it what should be the foreground and what should be the background inside of the picture. Now enough with the theory, let's go take some shots in the real world. So the first thing we want to go is to go inside of our portrait mode. This is pretty obvious. And by far the most important thing when taking some photos with your portrait mode is actually to set your focus. So on most smartphones, it's simply going to be tapping the place on your camera where you want to have the focus. So here I'm going to put on the branch at the bottom here with the snow on top. And this is very important because it's actually really hard for a camera to determine what is the right place to put your focus in your shot, especially that it has to do a lot of processing around what is your main focus point. So if you don't tell it what is the focus point, it's going to try and guess for you, but most of the times it's not going to get it right away. So it's really helpful when you set your focus manually using portrait mode. What is very interesting when using portrait mode is that you can concentrate on taking some detailed shots that most people won't think taking in the first place. So for example, here on this tree, I'm just going to take a really close-up shot of the texture of the tree here. And this is not the type of shot that most people would think taking when they walk around and see this tree. They're probably just going to take the whole tree and not a detail inside of the tree. And this is actually really great during the pandemic because you don't need to go really far to get some completely different shots. So you can just walk around your home, walk around where you live, and you can get some completely different shots by taking attention to details that might be interesting to your eye. If it's interesting to your eye, it might be interesting to take a picture of it. A very important tip I'm going to be giving you is actually to check your photo right away. So if you open your photo and you realize that's not the result you wanted, you can simply try again by moving a little bit your composition, and just by moving a little bit your shot, you can actually be getting completely different photos, and you might prefer that one in the end. So if it doesn't work, I would say just try again until you get something that actually works, because you never really know how the processing is going to work. So don't just think that you take a shot and you're going to check them later, because you might come back and realize it didn't work, and that's very frustrating. But if you take multiple shots right away and change the composition a little bit, you might get a perfect shot in the end. One of the biggest advantages of using portrait mode on a phone is actually you can edit your blur afterwards. So if we come inside of this shot here and we go inside of edit and then go on the adjust tab, we're gonna have options to change the blur. So your first option here is actually to change the blur amount. So usually it's around 80%, which is pretty good, but if you wanted to have less blur in the background, we can actually remove it completely or just add a little bit more if you want to. But I'm gonna leave it around 85. I think it was pretty good. Then if you go on depth, you can actually change the depth of where your focus point was. But here I think at 0, they got it right. So we're just gonna leave it there. Again, it's okay. But what is even better is if we come here and we have the little circle, we can actually click on different parts of the shot in the foreground here. We can actually see that the blur is going to change depending on where we click. So if by accident we didn't get the focus quite right, we can actually just click another part and change the focus to that point and change the blur around, which is really cool. One thing to remember is if you click on the background, let's say here, because this was already blurry because of the lens blur, you cannot fix it afterwards because that's not artificial blur that they added. That's real blur that was created using your lens. But as long as you touch parts that were in focus, you can change it afterwards. Once you're satisfied with your result, you click done. And here you can have a completely different focus and a different blur that you could edit afterwards, which is pretty cool. Let's wrap up this video because it's actually getting pretty dark. Before people get mad inside of the comments, I want to say right away that no, this is not going to be replacing DSLR or mirrorless anytime soon. But I think that when you know when it's working or when it doesn't, you can actually get really good results with the portrait mode, even if you're not taking pictures of people. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by hitting the like button below, and also consider subscribing to my channel. I'm going to be posting more videos on mobile photography in the coming months. See you in the next one. Bye bye.